Britain, like much of the Western world, is having a little bit of an identity crisis at the minute, and it's kind of stuck between two different sides. On the one hand, you've got a movement with people celebrating figures like Mo Farah and Raheem Sterling, both being athletes who moved to the UK from young and then excelled at the highest level. It's a movement that aims to give a voice to the underrepresented, and it also tries to reshape what much of Britain actually stands for. It even goes so far as to try and move education away from figures who are normally white, like Shakespeare and Churchill, to a history that supposedly more people can relate to.
The sun has not set on the British Empire. And one of the places that is most pronounced is within our education system.
That being said though, a lot of people just don't buy this. As far as they're concerned, they see the UK as kind of slipping away from what made it great. And this new idea of inclusivity and diversity as just sort of BS, considering that with most of these lesser known British white towns, they're not exactly thriving nowadays. And this new inclusivity movement is coming from both sides. It's being pushed by the young people in universities, and it's also coming from big business. All over the West now, businesses are pushing this idea of inclusivity and diversity, often at the expense of freedom of speech. We're talking here safe spaces and forced use of pronouns, that sort of thing. And while it's got its benefits, to some, this shutdown of opinion can just be a little bit dangerous.
Look at this, it's fucking everything. It's everything, right? What's this? The Pride fucking sponsored Costa coffee. Who does this help? I'd like a skinny latte, please, with 1 pump of sugar-free hazelnut syrup. Would you like it in a cup that publicly displays that you're happy with the notion of same-sex couples having the right to... I just want a fucking coffee, mate.
We're very much living in a world now where devout Christians are scared to say that they don't support gay marriage. University professors are being sacked for comments on trans rights, and I reckon you wouldn't actually last long in most corporate settings if you said that you don't support the BLM movement. Whichever side of the argument you come down on is, to be honest, irrelevant. All I'm saying is that there are very much two answers for what being British means. Does it value inclusiveness, or does it value tradition? And that brings us all the way round to British heavyweight boxing, because after thinking about it for a little bit, I really do think that both Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua serve as almost perfect figureheads for either sides of these arguments, whether they wanted to be or not.
Misses once again and again, Wilder. Well, he's a big man. Oh, great shot. Terrific right hand. That is a quality punch. Joshua with a big left hand. And AJ rocks Wembley all over again. A statement sent out.
Before I go off on a straight ramble here, I'm assuming your first question is, why the hell am I making this video now? Joshua has just lost and Fury has just battered Wilder in the trilogy and is on the road to be undisputed. Well, first of all, it's because I've been meaning to make this video for a little bit. And secondly, but more importantly, it's because despite AJ losing against Usyk, I don't really think it dents what either AJ or Fury stand for. The differences between these two are way bigger than just a loss or a win. So the $1 million question here is, why is there such a huge split in fan base between the two? The first point is kind of obvious and kind of uncomfortable at the same time, and that is Fury is white. The thing is that being white in a white country is always going to be an advantage, because to be honest, people just like to see themselves represented by their sports stars. They want to look at the TV, and in a weird sense, they want to feel some sort of achievement that when Fury wins, it could be them winning too. Is it racist that a lot of UK people support Fury over AJ primarily because he is white? I mean, maybe. Or is it just the same as black Americans supporting Mayweather or even British Nigerians supporting AJ? It really is a tricky subject to go down, so I'm not going to even touch it here. But all I'm saying is that for all we like to say that race doesn't matter in boxing, it very much does. I wouldn't say it's to the same extent in the UK as in the US, but there's definitely something there. And occasionally you do get fighters who call it out.
Myself, as well as many other African American fighters, for many, many years, we've had to deal with double standards. We've had to deal with, certain prejudices and certain bias where, if an African American fighter is not a villain, if he is not boisterous, if he's not a guy who is jumping on tables and just doing crazy things at press conferences, he's not worth the price of admission. He's not worth your streaming buy or your pay-per-view buy. When Floyd Mayweather was Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather, nobody paid attention. But all of a sudden, when he became the villain, when he became Money Mayweather, now he was worth the price of admission to see him lose.
But really, the differences between AJ and Fury are much more than just skin deep. And a key one is that AJ is just way more mainstream friendly. I don't want to go all Alex Jones on you right now, but there is very much a culture today of you just don't say that. You don't go against certain groups, you don't make any risky jokes, and you don't speak out on controversial issues unless you are damn sure you stand in the majority. And for the most part, Joshua has kinda toed this line. He does speak his mind occasionally, but you don't get the sense that you're seeing a raw, unfiltered look into the guy's psyche when you watch AJ on cam. It's all very safe and calculated, and that doesn't really change for his fight interviews either. I feel kinda harsh to say this because AJ definitely doesn't come across as an absolute tool like a lot of boxers, but personally I would call him boring. I mean, put it like this, if you had a choice between a Fury, AJ, White or Wilder interview, I'd bet good money that AJ would be at the bottom of your list. Yeah, he's had some cool moments here and there, but I'd say that's more because he's just been in with a few characters in his fights.
In my opinion, he lost two of the fight in the Olympics, to be honest. That's my opinion.
You're entitled to your opinion.
That's my opinion.
I'll bring my medal and I'll show you.
That's my opinion.
Your opinion is irrelevant.
How much Olympic champions have... so what? What does it mean?
History's been made.
What does it mean? You're just a big Ardley Harrison, mate.
History's been made.
Your heart will fail you. Trust me.
Who are you, a doctor?
Also, the thing is, AJ is 6'6" and built like a Greek god. Everyone had that one guy at school who was fucking amazing at everything. Captain of the football team, confident, he even had all the girls blushing. And because that guy was definitely not me, I can say confidently that you both secretly hate the guy and be fucking jealous of him. You wouldn't want to stand next to him at the urinal, I'm just gonna leave it like that. And that kind of guy would be someone like Anthony Joshua. So what I'm trying to say here is that I can understand why it's kind of hard to relate to a guy who was just so naturally talented. He went from never lacing up a pair of boxing gloves to winning a silver medal at the amateurs in just 4 years. And all this natural talent combined with being just so PC perfect on the mic has just turned a lot of the UK boxing audience off AJ. And personally, I'll say that a pretty big proportion of this is the fact that he is black. Yeah, Joshua still makes huge amounts of money in his pay-per-views, but I make a pretty clear distinction between Fury and Joshua fans. Fury supporters up until very recently were your pretty standard UK boxing fans. These were your 40-year-olds from Sunderland, as well as gypsies, who would know fighters like Anthony Yarde or Frank Buglioni. These are guys who are legit boxing fans and don't just tune in when it's Floyd Mayweather or Jake Paul. However, with Anthony Joshua, when his fights take place, it's much more of an event. Everyone tunes in, even people who don't give a crap about boxing. As someone who isn't from the US, it's kinda how I imagine a Mayweather fight to be, or something like the Champions League final here in Europe. You get people watching who don't even know who Joshua is fighting a lot of the time. They don't know who Pulev, Povetkin or Parker are, and they don't care because they are here for AJ. And when I say they, I mean a lot of women too. They see the guy as 6'6" Adonis, and suddenly all these women are boxing on the menu, and it doesn't take a genius to work out why.
You don't mind holding that? Don't flip it over just yet. I'll ask you, have you got any idea who that is?
I do not.
He's a boxer.
Anthony Joshua.
Hot stuff, I'd say.
What do you think of him, just by the basic looks of him?
Well, I saw him on Graham Norton recently and he seems like a very nice man.
Oh, I was going to say he's good looking.
And I think this is just another spice in the unlikable flavour pie that Joshua is to hardcore boxing fans. The very thing that makes him popular to the mainstream, being from a diverse background, being humble and being attractive, is the same reason that hardcores don't like him. How can people relate to such a perfect individual who looks so very different from themselves? But it's worth caveating here that being black is in no way a deal breaker to becoming a fan favourite among hardcores here in the UK. Derek Chisora and Kell Brook are the obvious two that stand out. But in my mind, I think the real core of why some fighters are loved over others is that people want to feel like their community is represented, that the fighter embodies the spirit of where they come from, both the good and the bad. You can see this in fighters like Ricky Hatton, Carl Frampton or Josh Warrington. They represent the good, but there is also the sense that they are just another guy in the pub struggling with the same life problems as the rest of us. And I just don't get that vibe from AJ listening to all his interviews. It's like he's kinda aware that he has to hit all the right motivational beats.
The meaning behind stay hungry. It's a form of consistency, motivation, and never lack hunger. I've been hungry, and I stay hungry in the sense that even when you don't have nothing, you don't settle for less. As I always say, when you're on ground zero, the only way to look is up. So you keep on achieving, you keep on achieving.
The irony in all this is that Joshua is far from perfect. In 2008, he was put in prison for 2 weeks for fighting and some other stuff. And in 2011, following a car search, the police found 8 ounces of weed and he ended up getting done for possession with intent to supply a Class B drug. Drug dealing in layman's terms. He got given 100 hours community service and was briefly banned from the GB squads. But this was a slap on the wrist to what it could have been. Dealing weed could have got AJ 14 years. So as of today in 2022, he could still theoretically be in prison. But Joshua made the most of his second chance. He fixed up and got back down to work. And 1 year later, he was holding that Olympic gold medal. It's actually a really inspiring story in itself. But the issue is that this story is never actually told. You see interview after interview with AJ, and people never really seem to touch on the police and drug dealing angle, and I don't know why. My instinct is that it's a bit of a combo of this keeping positive brand that AJ has got now. I mean, I doubt Under Armour or Lucozade would be too happy if their poster boy become thought of as a dealer, but I also think there's an element of AJ just being embarrassed about the whole deal.
Is he crossing the line with you at this point?
Well, I can never knock a man who talks facts, and that was my past, and we're here now. You know, I think you got to give credit as well due to the fact that I changed my life around. There's nothing wrong with what he's saying, but give credit as well where credit's due. I think there's a time and a place for certain things as well, and that's what I told him. I said, compose yourself, man. I said, that's the past. If you want to talk about things like that, you talk privately and personally. You haven't got to announce it to the world.
With AJ, I don't get a sense that he's a guy to open up on his issues. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. You're not obliged to spill your guts over on national TV. but I do think it would make him a fair bit more likeable. Without it, you have a fairly sugary bland persona. It may change a little bit with the Usyk loss, but I think the general point still stands. But anyway, this meant that UK boxing fans then looked to someone else that they could put their faith into. Someone else who really captivated the public. And I think we all know who that man is.
Oh, Batman. Don't like it, change the station. You don't like it, don't take photos. You don't like it, don't print it in your newspaper.
Come on! Go! Come on then! Let's go! No, Frank, I want to feel that power!
Champion of the world. There you go. Does that look like a fighter's body?
Personally, I find it kind of funny how Fury is portrayed now, being one of the most well-liked sports people in the media circuit, because I remember how much he was hated in the UK following the Klitschko win back in 2015. Let's just say he made a few comments that raised some eyebrows.
You know, the world has gone mad. There is no morals, there is no loyalty, there is no nothing. Everyone just do what you can, listen to the government, follow everybody like sheep, be brainwashed by all the Zionist Jewish people who own all the banks, all the papers, all the TV stations. Be brainwashed by them all.
I don't know if you've seen the tweet from the MP Chris Bryant, but he said today that your aggressive style of foul homophobia is precisely the kind that leads to young gay suicides.
Well, it's none of my concern what other people think or what other people want to say to me.
So where's all this come from?
Well, I think it stems from the fact that I quoted some quotes out of the Bible that I didn't write, clearly, because I didn't write the Bible.
There are a few comments there that, to me, are pretty indefensible, or at a bare minimum, terribly worded. But I wanted them in this video here because, at the end of the day, that is who Tyson Fury is. There's no point me leaving bits out to make him look like someone else, if you get me. And it's worth noting also that Fury comes from a gypsy community, and that community here in the UK is very closed off from other parts of society. They are also highly religious and highly traditional, so is it really that much of a shock that someone like Tyson holds these views on gay marriage? Yeah, he could have said it with a little bit more tact, but at the end of the day, he is a sportsman, not a politician. Plus, the whole idea of accepting something like gay marriage is still very new. Same-sex marriages were only introduced here in 2013, so I don't really think you can crucify the guy for holding a view which 10 odd years ago wasn't really that abnormal. In short, Fury definitely didn't pull any punches in speaking his mind, and it did have some pretty solid consequences. He ended up getting a 15k fine in the run-up to the Chisora 2 fight, but more importantly, the general public just kind of turned on him. Post-Klitschko, you saw more about what Fury was doing outside the ring than the masterclass he put on inside the ring. Just by the nature of boxing though, you're going to attract people with some very extreme mentalities. These are people who very often would not fit into normal society, and so you need to cut them just a little bit of slack. And ironically, it was a sportswoman who I suspect was brought on to slate Fury who said it best.
Well, of course it would be nice to think that all sports people should be role models. But at the same time, I think that's kind of an unrealistic expectation to put on people. If you think about it, sports people come from all walks of life. And to me, it's kind of like saying that everyone in society should be a role model and act in a certain way. We have all different types of people from different social, economic, academic backgrounds. Not everyone's going to be able to, you know, uphold and put the best foot forward. And it's exactly the same for sports people. Of course, it would be nice, but unrealistic. And with expectations, there's disappointment, and I think that's what happens.
Plus, With Fury coming from that gypsy background, he is very much of the mentality of words don't hurt, punches do. So why are people getting so worked up over a few words?
I'm sure there's a lot of people doing a lot worse out there than saying a few swear words or saying a few lines. There's people killing people, there's wars going on, there's children getting raped, for God's sake. And people are bothered about what I say, if I say fuck off or Vladimir's an idiot or whatever. Get real, yes. How can people be offended by something so petty? There's real things to offend people out there. There's people starving of hunger in Great Britain. There's people on the streets with nowhere to live. That's the problem. Why don't everyone make petitions about that and get the homeless off the street? Because the fact of the matter is, nobody gives a shit. Everyone only wants to get in on the bandwagon and jump on my gravy train. You could say whatever you like. You won't be in the paper tomorrow morning, Coogan. And you're our famous. But if I say what I wanted to say, then I'd be on the front page of the Sun tomorrow morning.
In a negative story.
Yeah. But if I give all my money to charity in the morning, Manchester Christie's Hospital, I'd have a little column in the morning that big.
It's true.
So there we are, that's what the press are. So there we are. But that sells papers, doesn't it? Being a nice person doesn't sell papers.
But despite Fury's not giving a shit persona, it was the pressure driven by the media post Klitschko, combined with a couple of drug allegations that drove Fury away from the sport. We aren't talking about your Mayweathers, Eubank Jr.'s or Klitschko's here, where you get a sense boxing is penciled in before anything else in their life. Fury needs an opponent to will him off the sofa. If Fury doesn't consider you a threat, that's when he performs the worst. But what this also meant is that post Klitschko, there was no more challenge, no bigger mountain to climb. And you could see that lack of drive seeping out into the run-up of the Klitschko rematch that never was.
But really, does it matter who wins or loses?
Well, I think it probably does, doesn't it?
Well, why does it matter?
Because you're the champion. You don't want to lose those belts.
But I'm still going to get paid, don't I, if I lose or win? Am I or not?
You are, but does it not mean something to you to be walking around as world heavyweight champion?
Nothing. Doesn't mean as much as this jumper means to me. Nothing. Them belts haven't seen daylight since I won them. I've already beat him, yeah? So my job's been done. I've already done the impossible. So if he knocks me out in 10 seconds, I'm happy. So what? I've been paid a lot of money. I've been a heavyweight champion of the world. And I've been involved in some big fights. And just because I lose one doesn't mean I'm not going to be involved in big fights in the future. I will be.
And coupled with all these internal battles going on, you had these multiple drug allegations happening behind the scenes. These allegations themselves were murky as hell at the time, and if I'm honest, they still are now. Think Game of Thrones mixed in with three-dimensional chess, and you get an idea about how complex this whole shit show is. It all first became public back in June 16, where the UK Anti-Doping Agency, or UKAD, suspended Tyson on the basis of elevated levels of nandrolone. But the funny thing is that UKAD also said that Tyson and Huey had elevated levels of nandrolone metabolites after their fights in February 2015. So Tyson pissed hot in June 16, which would be fair enough. But then at the same time, UKAD released data showing that he'd pissed hot over a year ago. So the obvious question would be, why did it take so long for UKAD to release this? I really would ask them myself, but they've already stated that the whole issue is from, and I'm quoting here, a delay in results management. Yeah, I mean, if I gave in my work a year late, I think some questions would be asked, but hey, maybe I'm the weird one. So, there were obviously questions surrounding this whole murky business. Was Fury clean and UKAD tried to set him up? Was Fury always dirty and they tried to cover up the 2015 test until someone piped up within UKAD? To be honest, there are more questions than answers. All we do know is that this all ended with Fury getting a 2-year backdated ban, a period where Tyson didn't fight anyway. For anyone who remembers, it's kinda like the ban Canelo got back in 2018. From the outside looking in, it looks to be a way for both parties to save face. UKAD can say Fury has now served a ban, but Fury gets to carry on with his career. It was a bit of a bullshit ban, to be honest, And what I'll also say is I don't quite believe Fury's defence for the whole deal.
So, I had all these court cases on as well. I was being charged with taking performance-enhancing drugs, nandrolone, something I'd never done. I had nandrolone in my system, it's produced naturally in the body, but they say my levels were elevated.
I mean, using Fury's logic here, that means you couldn't get done for taking testosterone sups, because that as well is produced naturally. But when this scenario was ongoing, this coupled with issues on the back of a Miss Varda test, meant Fury just had a bit of a breakdown.
You know, I said to him, I said, you need to do this, you need to do that, and he was going, okay. There was like no drive there. So, you know, clearly there was something amiss. So we finally got him to, he sought some help. We found out what the problem is, and from what I can gather, it is due to the way he's been treated and the current allegations. So a man can only take so much.
Fury was in a bad place mentally with the whole deal, and it's a story that is now pretty well told. Unlike McGregor, who had a similar type of downfall, Fury did rise back up from the ashes to tell all his doubters where to stick it. But what I find kind of ironic is that the same media that constantly poked Fury into making controversial comments is the same media putting him on a pedestal about him coming back from his depression and how much of an inspiration he is to the community. This changes because the media puts their focus on what they see as the most entertaining story for their audience. I don't think for a second that Fury has changed his opinion on something like gay marriage or an abortion. It's more that the media has just found something else that they can get headlines from, and importantly, Fury himself has learnt that people simply do not want to hear opinions that go against their own beliefs. Fury, of all people, has learnt to keep his mouth shut. So maybe this is the key takeaway from both fighters. Yes, people in the limelight are supposed to be professional, but if you truly want your public figures to speak their minds, you will inevitably have some opinions that you don't like. Whether that is Fury on homosexuality, or whether that is AJ on the Black Lives Matter movement. Plus, on a bit of an aside, if you are one of those people that like the fact that Fury is quote unquote unfiltered and speaks his mind, you really do have to respect AJ here for doing the same. And if you hate on that, you are no better than the people who witch hunted Fury for his own Christian beliefs. And the odd thing is that now both Joshua and Fury, two very different people, have learned to deal with the media in effectively the same way. They now shut themselves off. They understand that people are often hypocrites, saying that they want their athletes to be outspoken, but then rip them apart when they say something that they don't like. It's sad, but true.
Because even though being a role model is important, perception-wise, being a role model is being real. There's no role to play. So perception is based on who you really are. And people have to understand your views, but you have to play the game, because being a role model is the perfect image, isn't it? It's like, I don't do X, I don't do B, I don't do C. But in reality, we may do a little bit of A, and sometimes we mess up and do a bit of B, but yet we're trying to perfect C. That's the reality of things. So perception is hard, because if you give them the real, you're not a role model. But if you play the role of a role model, when you do make the real mistakes, people say, how did he mess up? So it's a tough job to play, isn't it, if you're going off perception.
You've said things in the past which people have found abhorrent. They've accused you of misogyny, they've accused you of homophobia,
no comment, don't even go there.
But do you accept that you've got to win over a larger number of people coming back this time before you can be fully accepted?
No comment.
You don't want to say anything about that at all?
No comment.
People won't like that if they hear you no commenting?
No comment.
Okay.
I'm a boxer, I'm not interested in politics or anything else. Boxing only, thank you.
And I think whether you like Fury or Joshua, you need to understand that they are both a product of the media game, whether they like to admit it or not. Fury got burnt in speaking out what he truly believed, and Joshua never really did, on the basis of keeping that market value nice and high. They both now have their own USPs, in Tyson being white in a white country and speaking on depression, an issue that hits men particularly hard. And Joshua is of course the mainstream voice of boxing, the poster boy for inclusion and diversity that anyone can slap on a poster. Both have played the game and both will continue on for many years, but I think a little bit more respect and compassion needs to be given for any boxer or anyone who steps outside the norm, because they are all, at the end of the day, just the same as us.
It sounds like a proper cockney, innit? Oh, fucking hell, never been to Nigeria, have I? Fucking
yeah, I'll go and have a little
never
gander.
been.
Have a little look.
I'll have a bit of that fucking pounded jam. A goosey soup.